And we are ready to go into Esoteric Astrology Adventure number 106C, page 375 of the Esoteric Astrology book. And we've been talking about Vulcan, really a planet of rhythm. There is some seventh ray connected with Vulcan in some respect. It's connected with the mineral kingdom, which in a way is the seventh kingdom counting from above to below. And there is in every cycle the moment of the impact. And Vulcan rules that moment of impact, the lifting of the hammer and its descent, to use a crude example. And at that point in the cycle when the descending hammer hits the object, we have the moment of impact, which Vulcan as a whole rules. So it's working in the mineral kingdom right now. It could also, I suppose, work in other kingdoms, but it has a special relation to all that is hard. To the mineral kingdom, it's involved in all the earth signs. It's a ruler, the earth signs representing the element which is most compressed. It's a double ruler of Taurus. It's a veiled ruler in Virgo, veiled by the moon, and it is also a ruler under the hierarchical moon in Aquarius, interestingly enough. But also it rules the last decanate. It's one of the rulers of the last or initiatory decanate in Capricorn, when the blinding light is released on the mountaintop. Vulcan is much associated with the liberation of compressed energy and hence the blindingness of the light when that release occurs. So metal is being shaped. Neither the precious gems nor the cruder elements, but metal itself is being shaped instrumentally according to that which is desired. But what is desired? That's the question. According to our values, so will be the quality of desire. So what do we value and what do we desire? Because accordingly, we will build. And it's possible to build dystopia as well as utopia. So we must be very cautious with this, the application of this powerful planet, because we can shape the material element into almost anything. And some of the forms will be ugly and dystopic, and others will be beautiful and utopic. He it is, I suppose he means Vulcan here, who is forging the way for the coming avatar. There are many avatars coming, but I suppose we're speaking of the Christ particularly. There's also an avatar on the seventh ray that will be appearing. Perhaps it will be Master R himself as the Lord of Civilization. And in a way, the great Sanat Kumara himself at one point will become the avatar to the entire Earth chain, and I suppose to the entire planetary scheme at one point of climactic development. He it is who is forging the way for the coming avatar, who will at the right moment come forth, embodying in himself the will of God, because Christ is supported by Shambhala, supported by the avatar of synthesis and the spirit of peace, which are extra-planetary beings, but are connected with Sanat Kumara in Shambhala, supported by the Buddha, who is, we are told, resident within Shambhala. So the avatar, the Christ, will be supported Shambalically and super-Shambalically in a way. He will come forth embodying in himself the will of God, which in a way is ever love in the particular solar system in which we find ourselves. The will of God, which is the divine will to good, not just the human will to goodness as conceived by the human being, but really the will to that which is in the mind of God as his purpose the mind of our planetary logos as his purpose. The divine will to good, to peace, through understanding, there's a big hint, and to right relations between men and between nations. So these are all shambolic themes, all of these. That should be noted. Oops. All shambolic themes. The will to good, of course. The spirit of peace, working through Shambhala as well and through hierarchy, but it will be peace, not an enforced peace, not simply a regimented peace, but a peace that comes through understanding the relations within the whole, and to actually express right relations between men and between nations. We've been told that the great Shambhala theme at this time is right human relations. We might spiral it upward and think of right relations throughout the globe, the chain, and really throughout the planetary scheme. And right relations are reflective of an archetype which is held in the mind of the planetary logos as his purpose. So we might almost call these things right relations. We might call them relations, archetypal relations. The Taurean influence must now be regarded as being of exceeding potency today. Well, as I say, in the 1930s, and if written later, then certainly not later than the early 40s, because apparently the great climax that DK talked about, in which the hierarchy was attempting to engineer, had not yet occurred when this was being written. So the Taurean influence must be regarded as being of exceeding potency today, with these Shambhala impacts occurring, particularly from the angle of the subjective spiritual values. And we're told, actually, in regard to the constellations that bring in the fourth ray, which are the Taurus, Scorpio, and Sagittarius, that the Scorpio has the most powerful effect, and probably on the physical plane, resulting in the wars. But with Taurus, it's the fourth ray has a more subjective effect, having to do with the creating in the minds of those who can respond the sense of what is really of greatest value, what true beauty is, what is worth striving for. So particularly from the angle of subjective spiritual values. Only certain human beings are motivated by subjective spiritual values, and others simply by desire and by that which the elemental instrument craves. It is Taurus which is the ruler and the guiding influence of that which is occurring everywhere. The potency of this sign is really amazing, and of course, you know, in ordinary astrology, everything is seen as more or less equal. All the signs are simply a circle of influences, and their constellational lords are not discussed, and their various degrees of evolution are not discussed. Certainly there must be differentiated evolution among the lords of the constellations of the zodiac, just the way there are among the planetary lords. Everywhere there is hierarchy. So great potency, exceeding potency today. If this is written during the war or right before it, when the weaponry was being forged, we can understand that. Now the new group of world servers has been strongly at work, and the many groups which had banded together for human welfare are at work trying to forge those instruments of relief for humanity. So I suppose we could say, in a higher sense and on a higher turn of the spiral, the Taurean influences are still very much at work. And one day it is said the Buddha will no longer be the representative of Shambhala at the festival of Wesak, and that something else will take his place. I mean, will it be, in fact, the new group of world servers in a receptive mode, receptive to Shambhala, which can take the place of the Buddha? not as the emissary, but at least as the recipient of the Shambhala force? Will they be sufficiently attuned to that Shambhala Taurean force, because the new group of world service is ruled by Taurus, sufficiently attuned to carry that yearly impress coming from Shambhala? Although he did say that perhaps the Wesak festival would one day die out, just as Good Friday would one day die out. All these eventualities are hidden in the knowledge of the hierarchy, and we can only pick up the hints as they are given. We don't know the timing. For now, I think it's best that we act as if the Wesak festival is really still in effect, and certainly that the new group of world service has a great responsibility at the time of the Wesak festival. It's then that they can be uniquely charged with a certain divine incentive and a fixed determination to carry forward the vision which has been presented to them as the plan has impressed them. I would like to call your attention to the fact that this sign is a synthetic sign, certainly a subjective sign with Aries, Taurus, and Gemini. A synthetic sign in the sense that it brings expression of an inner urge of some definite nature upon the physical plane. It is an expressive sign. Now, interestingly, the physical plane is in a way the fourth subplane: mental, astral, etheric, physical. Okay. The Agni Shaitans are involved here. There is an urge, a forward propulsion, a propulsion away from a center towards an objective, a sign of major life incentives. And given the concretizing ability of Vulcan, that inner urge can be brought out into expression in the lowest of the worlds, the physical world of solid, liquid, and gas. So something is coming through from the inner worlds into definite form upon the outer worlds. And in that sense, there is a synthesis between that inner urge and its expression upon the physical plane. The will to expression, it's a seventh ray type of will, or the will to express. And as I said, because of the rhythmic nature of Vulcan, it's difficult to think that it would not be a planet related in some way to the seventh ray. It has a powerful first ray, we are told, but the seventh ray is the external expression of the first ray, or the more concrete expression of it. It has a fourth ray, and probably a kind of second ray relating to the heart of the sun. The ray nature of the planets is known, but not known by us, and we can infer what it might be based upon the different qualities of the planets. Here we're dealing with an undiscovered planet that we are told is very real, but mythology attests to its existence. And so this mythology tells us in the story of Hephaestus and all the legends of Vulcan that a very real force is at work. It may be yet a while before our astronomy discovers the actual position of this, we're told, dense physical planet called Vulcan. So the synthetic nature of the sign Taurus, this it does because its basic quality demonstrates as desire in the mass of men and as will or directed purpose in the disciple or the initiate. Two types of demonstration, as I said. Taurus connected both with the 1 and the 6, both with will and desire, It manifests as stubbornness in the average man, which is a kind of resistance to that which is best for him. And this is literally willful adherence to personality aims. DK defines stubbornness. This is good. So definition. Of stubbornness. Willful adherence to personality aims, and a refusal to adapt. Gemini, following Taurus, is a very adaptable sign. Signs usually correct something in the preceding sign, but non-adaptable and inert and tamasic and resistant. These can be, in some ways, good qualities on the higher turn of the spiral, because there's a time when one must not give way. One must be a fortress in one's consciousness and energy system. And having Taurus as a more highly developed individual will help with that type of attitude, but this fixation to maintain personality aims prevents the movement of evolution. So it manifests as desire, as stubbornness in the average man, or as intelligently expressed will, actuated by the impulse of love in the advanced man. We do remember that Venus, one of the major planets of love, is the ruler of Taurus, and while DK has said that many Taurean personalities don't especially express the love energy, one can see that after all it is the second sign of the zodiac and thus associated with love, wisdom, and maybe especially with the wisdom side, but its resonance with the number 2, the wisdom, will promote love. So intelligence is there, and Venus is ruler, one of the major planets of intelligence. So intelligently expressed will, actuated by the impulse of love in the advanced man. So we see the two different ways in which the same energy can be received and expressed with quite different result. So this connotes adherence. Now this word adherence, sticking to something, not letting go of something. This is a Taurean factor, not letting go. Remaining or attachment to. Buddha came in Taurus to teach the lessons of non-attachment. In this most attached of all the signs, or in one way, and it's symbolizing humanity's attachment through desire, the Buddha taught the means of detachment through illumined understanding. So it manifests as stubbornness in the average man, and this is literally willful adherence to personality aims, and not adapting to something that might be better, or as intelligently expressed will, actuated by the impulse of love in the advanced man. After all, at the second initiation, which is closely connected to Taurus as well as to other signs, the astral body becomes more the vehicle of love than of lower desire. So the light flows in, and the astral body can express love, and it's at that point, I think, that the Taurean individual can express both love and will. Love, will, and light, really. This connotes adherence, again, to soul purpose, and let us say, and not to personality aims. Adherence to soul purpose. People who are Taureans, naturally and by natal inclination, he's giving a little bit of good advice here. In these subjective signs, DK has been giving a larger point of view, but every once in a while he'll throw in a little piece of advice for the individual who's born in or under such a sign, and it shows that Master DK has a keen knowledge of human nature and of the astrological influences which condition that human nature. So people who are Taureans naturally and by natal inclination would do well to consider this statement and thus test all their major determining activities by the question, is my present attitude, my work or intention actuated by personality desire, or am I working directly under soul urge and incentive. Obviously, some sort of desire is involved here. The incentive will be of the person, or the incentive will be of the soul. And so am I stubbornly persisting in my elemental personality ways, or am I adhering to the vision, illuminated vision of the soul, and working and planning and willing directly under soul urge and incentive? Perhaps we should. Some of us do have maybe Taurus in our chart in one place or another. Some of us are born with the sun in Taurus, or Taurus rising with the stellium of planets in Taurus. We can ask ourselves these questions, because it's easy to fool oneself. Hitler was a Taurus. He was born, I think, even in the first degree of Taurus, very early in Taurus on April 20th. It would have to be the very first degree. And I think we can see there that the self-aggrandizement and personality incentives were very, very strong. Kind of megalomania developed. A strong Leo aspect was there too, not only in his soul chart, upon which the Tibetan comments, but also in his personality chart with an elevated Saturn in Leo, leading to the rise and fall. It is so often the case with an elevated Saturn. So, this should give the keynote of all Taurean problems. There is a split between personality and soul, and from whence the life incentive. From whence the life incentive, personality or soul. And of course, honesty is required when asking oneself this type of question. This goes for those in any of the signs of the zodiac. He tells us a few things about Taureans here and there. One of the individuals who didn't do so well in his group, I think there were a couple, who really were pretty good examples of glamour. And one of them was a Taurean with Leo and Libra. The other was a Capricorn individual with strong Taurus conjunction of Mars and Neptune. It was a six-ray type. He had a six-ray personality. And I think he also, well, I don't want to misquote here, I think he also had Leo and Libra. They both had earth signs, and they both were pretty strong examples of the expression of glamour and of resistance to the kind of teaching DK was offering. Not that they willfully resisted, but something within their nature put up quite a fight against adapting to the Master's directives. The entire secret of divine purpose and of planning is hidden in this sign, even planning. I find it interesting. I haven't really noticed that Taurus was a sign of planning, but certainly it has to do with the Shambhala influence and the way that works out in hierarchy formulated by the custodians of the plan. So in order to plan, you have to have a vision, and purpose itself is all about the eventual archetypal vision which must be achieved. The vision must be realized, must be manifested, not just as a vision, but it must take form. So interesting, he says certain things. The entire secret of divine purpose and planning is hidden in the sign, owing fundamentally to the relation of the Pleiades, to the constellation, Taurus, the Great Bear, and to our solar system. So the Pleiades are related to, Pleiades have a lot of the intelligence aspect which is involved in planning. It's hard to say what they are monadically. Certainly they have a very powerful second and third ray, and because they are sort of the hub of our local cosmic wheel, they play a first-ray role as well. So the entire secret of the divine purpose and planning is hidden in this sign, owing fundamentally to the relation of the Pleiades to the constellation. Maybe that constellation is Taurus, or is it to the constellation the Great Bear, or to the constellation, the Great Bear, and to our solar system. So we have Taurus, it looks like we have Pleiades, Taurus, the Great Bear, in our solar system. This constitutes one of the most important triangles in our entire cosmic series of relationships, and this importance is also enhanced by the fact that the eye of the bull is the eye of revelation. We're being given some really cosmic hints here, and I suspect the eye of the bull will be the star Aldebaran, which is a giant star of considerable absolute magnitude. It's kind of an orange star, which would connect it somewhat with the fifth ray and with light. So we have a relationship here. It looks like the triangle is the Pleiades, Great Bear, and our solar system. Well, the Great Bear brings in the 7 rays into our solar system via the will aspect, and the Pleiades brings in the 7 rays according to the intelligence aspect. And Taurus is found within the Pleiades, within the line of sight of the Pleiades. Anyway, it's quite far from the Pleiades. Taurus is relatively close in terms of light years. The Pleiades, some, as it's now estimated, some over 400 light years away. But as you look towards the Pleiades, you do see Taurus. And there is a marriage, we are told, between the 7 rishis of the Great Bear and the 7 sisters or wives in the Pleiades. So the Pleiades then is subsuming, in a way, Taurus in this triangular relationship. We have something we might call Pleiades, Taurus, the Great Bear, and our solar system. The eye of light, the eye of revelation, the idea of realization, which is an atmic power on the 5th subplane of the atmic plane. All these things relate to Taurus. I suspect that the star Aldebaran will be much related to the factor of illumination, just as Venus and the 5th ray are. The underlying goal of the evolutionary process, or the onward rush of the Bull of God, that's what the evolutionary process is called. This is the evolutionary process is called by this name, onward rush, etc. Onward rush. Yeah, I just want to bring that, not spell out the whole thing, but there we are. Whoops. I wonder if we can get those going in the right direction. So the onward rush of the Bull of God, as it is esoterically called, reveals steadily and without cessation the stupendous and sublime plan of deity. And basically what he's saying is that the evolutionary process reveals the plan. So the process reveals the divine plan in form. And this is the subject which light reveals. So the divine plan is revealed by the light of revelation and illumination which streams forth from Taurus. So we might say that Taurus, well, let's put it like this way. The light of Taurus reveals the divine plan. And of course, the divine plan in form, because Taurus and Vulcan have so much to do with bringing the hidden incentive actually into a concrete shape. So the manifestation reveals, manifestation caused by Taurus Vulcan reveals the divine plan, which is the working out in time and space of the divine purpose, which is conceived by the eye of God, in the mind of God. God envisions his purpose, and that envisioning, I guess, has a lot to do with Taurus as well. The single eye of our planetary deity envisions these archetypal relationships which must be manifested. And that envisioning, I suppose, will draw upon the very great power of Taurus, certainly much greater than that of a planetary logos. This is a constellational logos we're talking about. So here we're dealing with purpose, plan, manifestation. We're dealing with will and desire in relation to the manifestation of the purpose and the plan. So, how does he say? And have I underlined it? The entire secret of divine purpose and planning is hidden in the sign. And for us it must remain a secret, except that we do know that there must be a vision if there is to be purpose and plan and eventual manifestation. And Taurus seems to be the sign which controls this hidden subjective vision in whatever type of conscious being. Right. There is at this time, owing to the influx of the Shambhala force, the establishing of a peculiar relation or alignment between the constellation Taurus, with its own specific alignment with the Pleiades and the Great Bear. See, that is another way we could look at that triangle above. We could look at it as Taurus Pleiades, Great Bear solar system, or we could look at a constellation hovering above our solar system, and that would be above our solar system would be Taurus, Pleiades, and the Great Bear. So that would be one of the more important triangles relative not only to our planet but to the entire solar system, as all of the heavenly men are responding to the Great Bear and to the Pleiades. And in this case, Taurus would take the place of the second aspect in this particular triangle. So because the Shambhala force is flowing in, and we have to remember that this was written even before the Shambhala impact of 75 and 2000. So we can say, well, the Shambhala force had been flowing in since 1825 and continued to flow in, or that even in the earlier part of the 20th century there had been an intensification of the Shambhala force, which was active as well during the war. So there is at this time, owing to the influx of the Shambhala force, the establishing of a peculiar relation or alignment between the constellation Taurus, with its own specific alignment with the Pleiades and Great Bear, the planet Pluto, and our Earth. So here's another triangle indicated, and it would be Taurus, Pluto, and Earth. So we have one constellation and two planets, whereas the other relationship would be three constellations, Taurus, Pleiades, and Great Bear, or Taurus Pleiades, considering them in a way as one, Great Bear, and our solar system. This whole science of triangles, I remember, in perhaps an ill-fated attempt, wrote, or tape-recorded at least, the entire series of triangles I could conceive in the zodiac: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Aries, Taurus, Cancer, Aries, Taurus, Leo, and so forth. I wonder if I ever finished that. I did finish, I think, all of the relationships between the planets, but there's so many different ways to turn these things, especially given what we call triangles in revolution. So in any particular planetary triangle, at different times, one of the three planets would assume the major position, and then the meaning of the triangle with respect to our Earth would change. Sometime I'll have to get that out and make a commentary on my commentary. It was done a long time ago, maybe 20 years ago, and it needs to see the light of day, if possible. So, this particular relationship, because after all, Pluto is a planet of death and finality and of the upsurging of the negative for its dissipation, Taurus, Pluto, and Earth, I mean, we can have great materialism indicated here, the lower regions. But there's also the possibility of breaking up the obstructions and then leading into the great light. So this produces much of the present world difficulty, the forging of weapons under Taurus, Vulcan, Pluto, death stalking the planet, all on our on our Earth. This produces much of the present world difficulty, and one which the modern astrologer would do well to consider. It constitutes a major cosmic triangle at this time, conditioning much that is now happening. So there's a cleansing process. It was occurring in the lead up to the war and during the war. There was this whole question about whether it would be personal desire stubbornly adhered to or the will of the soul. The Allied forces represented the will of the soul, and the Axis forces the stubborn adherence to personality prerogatives, and all this occurring upon our Earth. There's also a relationship with Aries, Pluto, and Shambhala, thus Aries, Pluto, and our Earth. But I would say that there's so much here to do with the clearing away of concrete obstructions. Taurus, as we know with Vulcan, can forge those forms which are resistant and obstructive, and these had to be destroyed, and so many of them were destroyed, and the old conditions were not rebuilt. Although many wanted to do that, and the Tibetan spoke against that retroactive rebuilding and restoration of a former time. So this, there are three triangles that have been here discussed. We could call them like this. We could say the Taurus, Pleiades, Great Bear, or Taurus, Pleiades, Great Bear, Solar System, or Taurus, Pluto and the Earth, involving the Pleiades because, and involving the Great Bear, because Taurus is aligned with them. And that tells us that there definitely is a triangle called Taurus, Pleiades, and the Great Bear, independently of our solar system. So the present world difficulty, the breaking down of materialism, we might say. There is also a spiritual type of materialism in which the heaven worlds, the subtle worlds, are considered in very material terms, and there are many minds today that are possessed by that type of materialistic vision. They are a long way from seeing that their materialism actually does exist. So this, maybe I should list these. Well, I think we have sufficient there. Okay, so it constitutes a major cosmic triangle at this time, conditioning much that is now happening, and presumably conditioning even that which is happening now some 70 years later, maybe even almost 80 years later. We have not emerged. The timing is rapid for the hierarchy and seems long for us, but humanity is still, even though the death blow to materialism has been struck with the a development of atomic energy, he tells us, and the liberation of energy demonstrated through the atomic bomb, even though that has occurred, there are still many consciousnesses, especially those upon the sixth ray, I think, and some on the third ray, who have never outgrown that limitation of consciousness, which we call materialism, in which we think that that which is presented by the lower senses is reality. But gradually this perception has to be eroded. It's really based on a profound materialistic ignorance, and in an atomic age it's a very dangerous thing. Okay, so this Shambhala force is that which fans or intensifies the light. There's Taurus again, right? Fans or intensifies the light, by which the removal of obstructions and fans or intensifies the light by the removal of obstructions and proceeds from far distant places, pouring through the eye of illumination into those spheres of influence upon the sorrowful planet the Earth, impelling the bull upon its onward rush. So this is the poetic language of the old commentary. What does it mean? Impelling the bull, this is the process of evolution. Proceeds from far distant places like Aldebaran, or beyond, Aldebaran or beyond. Sometimes I wonder whether Orion might not be involved in this, being such a great constellation of illumination. So the Shambhala force is that which fans or intensifies the light, the liberating light, by the removal of obstructions. It's a virtuous circle. Obstructions release the light, and the light destroy the obstructions. Removing of obstructions, and Pluto is involved here, even Pluto Vulcan, and also Vulcan, that's Venus, Vulcan, by the removal of obstructions, and that's been going on very much during the war and even following, and proceeds from far distant places, unspecified, maybe more than Aldebaran, maybe even farther away. Than Aldebaran, pouring through the eye of illumination into those spheres of influence upon the sorrowful planet the Earth. Which spheres of influence? Well, perhaps spheres of influence of both of the will and of desire. And we are on this sorrowful planet, this planet of detachment. That seems to be the cause of sorrow, the incompleteness sensed when we're forced to detach, even though that detachment allows us to attach to something which makes us far more complete. Pouring through the eye of illumination into those spheres of influence upon the sorrowful planet the Earth, impelling the bull upon its onward rush. So Shambhala is promoting evolution. And Shambhala is fed from far distant sources. Shambhala, fed from far distant sources, impels evolution. And so speaks the old commentary. Now, when we think of that rushing forward, we realize how much Taurus is involved with the incentive to evolve, which means the incentive to bring the inner forms into outer expression, forged into outer expression by the power of Vulcan. So once Taurus gets moving and overcomes its unadaptable, stubborn resistance to a higher vision, It impels the whole evolutionary process, propels it, in fact. The import of this is that the energy of will newly released by Sanat Kumara upon our planet, and let's say through the Shambhala impacts, emanates via the head center of the planetary logos. Where is this going to be found? Well, certainly on the logoic plane of the cosmic physical plane, but there are other and higher head centers, I suppose, on the cosmic astral plane, and even a correspondence on the cosmic mental plane. But DK is going to give his explanation of this. The import of this is that the energy of will newly released by Sanat Kumara upon our planet emanates via the head center of the planetary logos from the Great Bear. Sometimes called by Stephen Pugh, he called it the cosmic Manu. I do believe it is a great first ray center, and it is connected with the 7 head centers. Let's see, how can I put this here? Representing the 7 head centers in the one about whom not may be said. So the head center of the planetary logos connected with the 7 head centers of the one about whom not may be said. It is stepped down in vibration via one of the Pleiades. Hence its influence upon matter, because the Pleiades have a strong third ray and are associated with matter. And probably it's the Pleiad most connected with Earth, let's say. And hence also its pronounced Taurean effect upon humanity, and so enters the solar system. It is there absorbed by that major center of our planetary life to which we give the name Shambhala. So there is kind of a descent here. We have something involving, let's take a look at this, kind of interesting. Something involving the Great Bear, one Pleiad, and also perhaps Aldebaran as being the eye in Taurus, reaching planetary logos, Shambhala, and step down to the planet, something like that. So coming from far sources, the Great Bear, I suppose, is considered a far source, even though, interestingly, its technical physical condition is nearer to us, to our solar system, than are the Pleiades. The Pleiades really are a greater constellation than the Great Bear. The Pleiades they're always discovering more stars, while 7 or 9 major stars, just as there are 7 or 9 major paths on the way of higher evolution, there are 800, 900 Pleiades. One begins to suspect that one will discover the 1,000-petaled lotus of the one about whom not may be said in the Pleiades. So the old commentary has given it to us in poetic language, but it does describe a planetary descent. And who is that particular Pleiad that's most connected with Earth? And she's veiled and hid her face in shame because she married a mortal. One Pleiad, perhaps the one who married a mortal. Meaning perhaps a non-sacred planet such as the Earth, because we have the sacred, we have the non-sacred, sacred, and synthesizing planets. Earth is a non-sacred, hence in a way a mortal. Aldebaran may be involved with that Pleiad. Illumination coming forth to our planetary logos, the light redeeming matter, clearing away obstructions, and step down to the planet and eventually to man. Okay. Well, we're getting there. Its effect is necessarily twofold. It produces in certain nations, races, and individuals a welling up of self-will, or the will to power which is characteristic of the developed lower nature. The personality wants power. Maybe some of you have seen that sort of German documentary made, I think, in 1933 or so, called The Triumph of Will. This is an example of that welling up of the self-will in certain nations, races, and individuals, which is characteristic of the developed lower nature and the personality aspect of integrated selfhood, because integration is an act of empowerment. It produces, though less readily, a stimulation of the will to serve the plan, as it is grasped by the world aspirants, the world disciples and initiates, and thus the purposes of deity are materialized. When we're dealing with materialization, we're dealing with a very material and rather dense sign here, dense in some ways, Taurus, an energy which promotes, through Vulcan, materialization, and maybe through some of its other rays which we cannot specify but can only speculate upon. So DK is giving us some pretty cosmic alignments here. It fans the Shambhala force, fans or intensifies the light by the removal of obstructions, and proceeds from far distant places, the Great Bear perhaps, even farther and away, considered farther away than Aldebaran, pouring through the eye of illumination. So the distant places would be the two super constellations, Great Bear and Pleiades, especially one of the Pleiades, pouring through the eye of illumination, maybe Aldebaran, into those spheres of influence upon the sorrowful planet, spheres of influence which are of the desire nature and of the will nature, into Shambhala, but also into the area of desire and arousing the assertion of integrated personalities, the integrated third aspect, but also arousing the will to good in those who can tremblingly respond to it. And so speaks the old commentary. We have to be grateful to Master DK for providing us with tremendous realization of cosmic interlinking. Maybe as we're living our daily lives, we don't realize the ultimate sources from which the energies we are using have come. But when we open our minds to that possibility, a much wider horizon appears before us. And the possibility of cooperating with spheres of influence far beyond our normal ring pass knot opens up to us, and we get the specifics of the energy flows. He is such an expert in the understanding of the planetary, solar, constellational, hierarchical energies. So in this will to serve, the will to good, the direction of energy is very important. If we know where it comes from, what its purpose is, we will know how to direct it. We will be able to engage, I think, in what is called active service on the atmic plane. I've often thought, there is a picture of Master DK going around, several pictures more or less of the same type. You know, there's a cult gossip and a cult rumor, and it is said that he said, well, it's a pretty good likeness. That picture seems to show a certain Taurean quality. I don't know, maybe even a Leonian quality. And certainly he is connected with Gemini, because he is the messenger of the hierarchy. But Taurus carries the greatest light, and Leo carries the will to illumine. Well, it will be shown one day what are the prevailing signs of the particular masters, which are likely to be quite steady over a long period of time, because those are the energies which most characterize them and which have to be used, I think, in a longer span until they are fully expressed. Certainly, Master DK is the messenger of the hierarchy, the delegated messenger, bringing out the most impressive of teachings in 3 installments, has that quality of Gemini and Mercury. But there are other things involved here, and I've often wondered whether the illuminating energy of Taurus and the ability to get into matter and to really redeem it is also not part of his excuse me, a part of his equipment. Well, I think, yep, we are at that point, and I think maybe I will say this is the end of Esoteric Astrology 106. C, page something. I always say page something. Never know where I am quite. Page 376. Okay. Okay. I think I'm too high up here. Should be down lower. Page 376. And we will begin, I think, a new tape or program, beginning of Esoteric Astrology 107, D, page 376. Taurus is such an interesting sign. You know, it's taken me a long time to understand just how much more there is to esoteric astrology than there is to the ordinary presentation. I began, as so many did, although I had the opportunity, I had the Esoteric Astrology book in my hand, but I think it was a little easier in some ways to read the more concrete-minded astrology books, which were more organized in a concrete-minded way, and to think that I was really learning something, and maybe I was. But I had to unlearn a lot in order to deal with Master DK's Esoteric Astrology, which is a great simplification in many ways, and seems to reverse many ideas. When you think of the treatment of the earth signs in esoteric astrology compared to the ordinary discussion of personality astrology, there's such a contrast. And the further I go in astrology, the more I realize the great contrast between what Master DK is presenting and what has been presented in a rather scholarly way in ordinary astrology books, because the ordinary astrologers are focused on the personality and not especially on the spiritual development, and if they are focused on spiritual development, they're still a little vague about the technicalities of that development. And Master DK has laid out an entire science of spiritual development through esoteric psychology and healing and education. So we know the different parts of the human being and the astrology of those parts. I think Alan Leo, in an early book, maybe it was 1917, it was also called Esoteric Astrology. He tried to get at some of this, and but you have to be quite theosophically inclined to read that book. He uses much of the theosophical terminology, and Master DK, maybe, what is it, some 20 years later or a little less, started presenting esoteric astrology in a way that the Western mind could more easily achieve. Well, it's obvious that one of the books was written by a disciple, maybe an initiate in astrology, maybe, Alan Leo, and the other was written by a master, and you can, if you have the sense of it, you can really grasp the difference. Although I think it's taken me a long time to see more clearly what the distinction really is. At first, it doesn't appear necessarily, but gradually, the the contrast between the truly esoteric approach and the ordinary astrological approach clarifies in the mind. Okay, well, we'll go on here in Esoteric Astrology Adventure 107, and it will be actually A, not D. Okay? And that will be it for the moment. Such an interesting subject. I wish I could or had the time to talk through a number of these books. Obviously, thinking as I go, maybe not everything presented in the King's English and utterly perfectly, but a chance to explore this with a degree of meticulous entirety, which is that quality of the third aspect of the second ray. To explore some of these factors with meticulous entirety, and so attempt to leave no stone unturned, although obviously failing to do so, but still the attempt. And if students of this book have the patience to work with me through it, some new ideas may come, or some objections may come to what I say, or some realizations that what I say is not true, but something else is true, or that what I say is true and useful. Anyway, it's an attempt to be careful, cautious, respectful of the book by a very careful reading of it. Good. Well, we'll go on in a little while. See you then.